Hi, Mickey. What's with the bounty paper towels you're holding up? Are they?
Well, this is how much do you think this cost me, Bob? It's a roll of paper towels.
I don't know, $35.
$5, Bob.
well, good. Then inflation, it must be in check because I would have guessed 35
for a fucking roll of paper towels. And you don't even want to get into this, man.
Oh, the toilet paper? Not with you. No, thanks. Anyway.
Yeah, no.
$7
for a 4-pack of toilet paper.
Bargain. I would have gotten 2. The inflation was up
its toll.
7.5%. 7.5%.
And I have a question about inflation. It seems to me, AOC was quoted as saying there's something wrong with capitalism recently, and everybody laughed at her.
I think she's been quoted more than once, yes.
Okay, but I think she has a point with inflation because the cycle of capitalism with respect to its inflation is just the time when working class wages start to rise, people start freaking out about inflation and they clamp down on the recovery, and they always over clamp down, so we have a recession. Mm-hmm. And we never have that adjustment where because workers are more in demand, they take a bigger share of the pie. The cycle always interrupts that, and stockbrokers never take a cut. They never say stockbrokers are making too much money, so there's a danger of inflation. We better clamp down on the economy. It's always the people who are in the biggest group, which is regular workers, and it just seems very unfair. And there's something wrong. All the what's the word? The stickiness in the system, the clumsiness in the system, works to prevent the adjustment where workers grab more of the pie.
Yeah, first a word about stockbrokers, as long as you brought them up. My understanding is, and this was the case last time I checked, like 10 years ago, that the standard bonus structure is that when the stocks they pick go up, they get a piece of the action. But when they go down, when they have a bad year, or maybe it's on an annual basis, so they get a bonus when things go up, but they don't get penalized when things go down. And when you think about it, in addition to being, just treating, the already well-to-do pretty well, that would tend to encourage gambling on their part when you think about it and introduce volatility into the system. Anyway,
right, and boosterism and mindless boosterism.
Yeah. Just right. It doesn't make them as risk averse as they should be.
Selling people things they shouldn't buy.
So, but anyway, I don't know. I don't know the actual answer to your question. I do know that I'm in favor of redistribution and taxing rich people, and that this is kind of one of the reasons. And so
I'm less in favor, but I do want people to earn as much money as they reasonably can, and the system seems stacked against them. That's all. I've heard that complaint.
I don't deny it. I haven't really looked into that complaint per se. I mean, the inflation this time around has really unusual. Who else is contributing to inflation? These gosh darn Canadian truckers.
Well,
bottling up the supply.
I do tend to agree with Matt Iglesias when they start shutting down our auto industry. It's time to take action.
Time to bring out the drone strikes, you think?
Can you use drone strikes? Can we drench them with?
Sure, they're not Americans. Yeah, you can use drone strikes on any non-Americans who annoy you.
I think some of them are Americans.
Collateral damage.
Anyway, so what are we going to talk about? We're confronting the post-Zucker era here.
I will say one thing about Zucker. I wrote this down because I found it so touching. Just gosh darn moving. According to the Los Angeles Times, in a meeting between some of CNN's staffers and its corporate leadership, CNN correspondent Jamie Gangel shared that, as young people say, she shared that 4 members of the congressional committee investigating January 6th had called Jamie Gangel to say that Zucker's exit left them, quote, his exit from CNN left them, quote, devastated for our democracy, Mickey. Without Jeff Zucker at the helm, how will American democracy survive?
I still haven't recovered. I'm prowling the halls of the Core Club where he's been seen dining with Ben Smith.
Has he?
Hoping I can talk him into doing something more for democracy. But
maybe Ben Smith will enlist him in his new media venture. That's
boy, would that be stupid.
Could I just quickly review Jeff Zucker's contributions to democracy? Okay, so first of all, he brought us Trump. Had it not been for The Apprentice, Trump would not be with us. And then during the campaign, he chose to have CNN telecast all of Trump's speeches forever because they were good for ratings. That helped Trump get elected. Then once Trump was elected, he turned CNN into the flagship of the resistance, or one of many competing flagships for the resistance, which only intensified support for Trump, of course, because they rightly perceived that the mainstream media had turned anti-Trump. And so that further polarized America. And those are Jeff Zucker's main contributions to American democracy. And
I guess I should. My contention was always that for all his flaws, Trump's presidency was good for America. You scoff, but imagine if Hillary had been elected, all the forces that led to Trump would still be building and building and building, and we would just have had the explosion 4 years later, perhaps with a more responsible leader.
Well, that's the point. Inevitably, you cannot name an American who would be a less responsible spokesperson for the forgotten Americans.
Michael Avenatti.
He would not be worse than Trump. He would not be worse than Trump. No, he wouldn't. Are you kidding?
Trump did a few things well. He did a few things well.
Remind me.
Well, the border, he tried A, he tried B, he tried C, and eventually C and D worked, and the border came under control.
But he didn't even build his damn wall, which actually would have been a gift to Biden, by the way. Maybe that's why he didn't do it.
No, he should have built the wall, but he intimidated Mexico into stopping the surge, and he instituted the Remain in Mexico program, which was sort of a masterstroke that Biden killed.
I have a question. I have a question about Trump. So according to the canons of journalism, it's supposed to take 3 data points to make a trend. I only have 2, but you tell me.
You only need 2 these days.
Oh, really?
The internet has sped things up.
That's inflation too?
If you wait for 3, you're going to get left behind.
Okay.
So go for it.
Well, the question is the trend, that Republican elites finally turn on Trump decisively? And you can probably guess the 2 data points. One is Pence, I guess a week or a little more ago, coming out and saying on January 6th, he did the right thing and in a way more directly than he ever had before, confronting Trump on that issue, though not by name. And the other is Mitch McConnell denouncing the Republican National Committee's characterization of the January 6th rioters as what is it? Exercising legitimate political discourse, or whatever the term was. That was also pretty close to a rebuke of Trump. And those are two big guys. Am I reading too much into this?
You're reading too much into it. I they're both good moves, I think, especially McConnell. But no, the source of Trump's support are voters, not McConnell. So what the RNC did is more of a bellwether than what either of these 2 people did. I think the RNC was a huge mistake, but I don't think the voters were demanding that. I went back and read the statement, hoping that it was being taken out of context by the press, legitimate political discourse. And there is a reading where you can say, well, some of the protests were there for legitimate political discourse, but it's a pretty tenuous thing to hang your hat on. So, is there a huge grassroots demand for Liz Cheney's head? I don't think so. There's a Trump demand for Liz Cheney's head, and there's a voter support for Trump. But I don't think voters are baying for Liz Cheney to be thrown out of the party. The party's going to decide whether to throw her out, and they probably will.
Tell me this. Can you name Trumpist elites, from media to politics, from Tucker Carlson to Josh Hawley? Can you name Trumpist elites who you are sure actually want Trump to run for re-election again?
No, I think the vast majority of them secretly don't. But
will that hurt him? I mean, will that make it less likely to wind up with a nomination?
Does Tucker Carlson not want? I think Tucker may want Trump to run again.
That's an interesting question.
I think Laura Ingraham may want Trump to run again.
But Carlson is already feeling, at least at a visceral level, some sense of rivalry. I'm sure he's already thinking that he could be the leader of the movement, leaving aside whether he plans to run for office, right?
I used to think that, and he could still be the leader of the movement, and Trump hasn't reacted jealously against him the way he has against other people who might pose threats. Maybe he made a secret promise to Trump that he wouldn't run against him. Who knows? Maybe he's gone. I sort of think he's gone too far. He sort of destroyed his viability by adopting some of these crazy
audience capture. But
I'm sure he's quite happy doing what he's doing. But
what's his craziest thing? Like the documentary?
The documentary. But I haven't tried to catalog all of them.
Have you seen the documentary?
I've not seen the documentary.
We should watch that and talk about it in the Parrot Room someday.
That'd be good.
Or even here.
But that's a good question you ask, and I'm trying to think. Josh Hawley would rather Trump not run. Tom Cotton presumably would rather Trump not run. Maybe.
Now, is that because they want to run, or because they just think he's toxic at this point?
It opens up because they have his ideas, and if he's gone, it opens up new career possibilities for them.
Yeah.
Even somebody like Mo Brooks, probably. He has aspirations. He wants to be a senator. He could do great things if he had an open field. Do the people at American Greatness want Trump to run? I mean, I must know some people who really want Trump to run, but
Steve Bannon. Give me a week. Steve Bannon may.
Give me a week and I'll think of some.
I think Trump is good business for Steve Bannon, right?
Probably.
Although on the other hand, Bannon, I think, is actually committed to the movement. So if he sees Trump as an obstacle,
he could always go back to biosphere too.
He could come full circle in the biosphere.
There's this. I had this flash of. Well, now Congress is passing all these like nickel and dime bills that actually are probably on balance good, like eliminating mandatory arbitration for sexual harassment cases and post office reform and the Electoral Count Act.
In what venues? The arbitration is in government offices or
private.
What?
Private. I think private.
Congress can do that? It had been mandatory under...
I don't think so. I think that's a good question. Maybe I have it wrong. Can Congress just say this clause in contracts is illegal under the Commerce Clause? Maybe. I don't know.
You wouldn't think. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, I
was raised under the I was taught in law school that they could do anything under the Commerce Clause. So
okay,
that turns out to be wrong, but virtually anything. And so people are saying, well, Biden would have been would have been a much better and more successful president if they hadn't won both seats in Georgia. He wouldn't have had a majority. He would have had to pass all these little bills. He would look good. He would do whatever he was doing on the virus. And he wouldn't have had the massive failure of Build Back Better and the over-stimulus of his stimulus bill, which contributed to the inflation. So, but he didn't do that. Or that didn't happen. He got it in his head. He was the new FDR and is heading for a massive failure in that regard. And I just had this flash that if they get really destroyed in the midterms, which looks highly possible, he'll just give up. He'll just say, "Okay, I'm tired. I'm quitting." Let Kamala Harris take the loss. Give her a year to show she's a good president, and and she can get primaried. And but I'm done. Don't you think that's possible?
You're prone to paranoid fantasies, and this is definitely something you don't want to happen. So this would kind of fall in that category. No, that's not.
Why do I not want it to happen? Why do I not want it to happen?
I think you fear Kamala Harris at some kind of visceral level, which we may explore in the Parrot Room.
No, I don't fear Kamala Harris. She's so incompetent that she's nothing to fear.
You sure?
I guess there's a foreign policy worry that she would screw things up, but that's she's proving herself, Bob. They've sent her to the Munich conference to help keep NATO in line about Ukraine. Doesn't that build your confidence?
There will be peace in our time, as I understand it, as a result of that.
That was my biggest tweet of the week.
By the way,
it was a weird tweet. I just I linked to the news story saying Kamala Harris going to solve the Ukraine crisis, and wrote "yikes." And not only did I get a huge response, but I got an incredible number of comments. People felt the need to pile on Kamala Harris. I usually get like 6 comments. I got 212 or something. It was weird.
She is not beloved. She's not.
She has a dedicated claque of haters. That's for sure.
Yeah. Who is on her side? The wine mom, a subset of the wine moms.
I don't. That's a very good question. They may be the same people as the Republicans who want Trump to run again. I mean,
they should get together.
Vanishing minority.
Form a third party. The two of them.
It probably doesn't even include Willie Brown. So what the hell?
Don't go there, Mickey. What are you insinuating about Kamala Harris's rise through the ranks, Mickey?
I think Willie Brown was a help to her. Everybody agrees with that. And she went out with Willie Brown. Everybody agrees with that. So I don't see what's so risque about it all.
I like the phrase "went out." Did they go to the theater?
Probably the opera in San Francisco is very good. Maybe they went to the opera.
It is said to be. So that could be it.
So you don't like my flash of Biden. I don't see it as paranoia. I just see it as, in fact, I'm sort of more worried about Biden actually winning a second term and being completely senile during a second term than I am of Kamala governing for 1 year of inaction. Unless that's the moment where China chooses to invade Taiwan. But keep in mind, Kamala is so incompetent that she's like Trump. She's unpredictable. You don't know. She might order a nuclear strike. She's so incompetent, right? You don't know.
I don't see a nuclear strike.
So China has to worry about that. She's not like, the standard blob person. You know what the blob's going to do, right?
What is the blob going to do? Oh, you mean you do know what the blob's going to do? Yeah, the blob is going to insist that we stand by the Ukrainian people by not doing the one thing that could keep them from getting invaded. The blob is adamant. That's what the blob is doing.
What did you think of that Richard Haas article that I sent you?
I just kind of glanced at it. I just was appraising it for possible peace. I was thinking about writing a piece about it, and it didn't work for that. Haas, I did see a tweet of his where he says, okay, I think Biden's done all that he can do, which means, he's with the blob consensus that you shouldn't do the one thing that would stop the invasion, which is just say, yeah, actually, you're right. We do not honestly plan to admit Ukraine to NATO. Yeah, right. We admit it. We're done.
The basic thrust of the Haas piece was, it's not that Putin has us where he wants us. We have Putin where we want him. He has very few options. And I do think Biden's policy has been sort of, am I crazy? Shockingly successful in saying, when he goes around and says, Russia is about to invade Ukraine, that's fairly effective at forestalling a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Not only is it reverse psychology, it's sort of, Russia wants to prove us wrong and doesn't want to seem like a predictable villain in the eyes of the world. So they have to do something else for a while. And their window apparently only extends to mid-March.
Oh,
when
I don't know.
can no longer sustain.
Look, you just can't tell me that once the snow melts, if they really had to invade Ukraine, it was essential for their own self-preservation, they would just go, gosh, I don't know what to do. How will we do these drone strikes when it's muddy? I mean, they can find a way. Come on.
And the newest wrinkle is they're going to attack the coast and also attack Moldova, whatever Moldova is.
I also don't think it's going to be, I still don't think they're going to try to even put troops in Kiev. Now, today's news was that the invasion is closer than we think, after yesterday's news being, well, maybe this standoff could go forever. But in any event, the Olympics when do the Olympics end? Soon, within days, right? And at that point, it certainly becomes more possible that he'll do it. And I'm sure the thawing thing is some consideration, in which case you would expect, that the 2 weeks after the Olympics end, 2 or 3 weeks will be important weeks.
But Haas did offer some off-ramps for Putin to save face.
Like what?
Well, he pointed out that Biden had said, "Oh, we're not going to admit them anytime soon," and he pointed out that, well, we can rearrange our missiles and
right.
reduce the missile threat, and it's not enough, but at least there was something there.
Right,
I agree,
it
wasn't nearly enough.
You can't just mumble these things in a kind of incremental way. You have to decide what is the most that Biden feels politically he can say about Ukraine and NATO by way of reassuring Russia. And then he has to save that. Okay. They have to work it out among the diplomats. And then he has to come out and say, we'll do this and this and this with missiles. And
we didn't do that. We didn't do that with the U2 with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, they never said publicly what the deal was at all, and it was a secret deal.
Right. Well, that worked.
Yeah, but this can't work because the goal here is Putin needs to save face. I mean, happily, at that point, in the early 60s, the Soviets didn't demand more face saving than they got. Fine. But I think Putin, by common reckoning, has put himself in a position where it's extremely hard for him to back down if we give him 0 items on his wish list. Remember, his wish list consists of all of this shit and that we're definitely not going to do, like disassemble, go back in time and undo the last 2 decades worth of growth of NATO and all that, or whatever it is. But the one thing everyone agrees that is essential, well, first of all, that's really important to him. And by the way, people in the know have been saying this for a long time about Russia, that it isn't just Putin, it's all Russian elites. Peter Beinart had a thing about this in his newsletter, quoting Bill Burns, a memo he sent Condoleezza Rice in 2008, saying all Russian elites consider Ukraine a total red line. If you talk about bringing Ukraine into NATO, you're giving Russia an invitation to mess around in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Bill Burns spelled it all out in 2008 in a memo to the Bush administration, which nonetheless went out and promised NATO membership to Ukraine.
There's this idea out there that Russia doesn't really care about the NATO business. They really care more about other things. Is that bullshit?
Well, they also they also care about other things. There is definitely a fear of Ukraine drifting away, and that includes economic integration with Europe. Yes, there is that fear, but they're not demanding anything on that front now. So to get back to Putin's face saving, what the absolute minimum, I think, for face saving purposes is we have to say something more definitive about Ukraine and NATO than we've said so far. And I would advise them to wait, store it up, work the terms out under the table with Putin, and then come out and say it, and Putin goes, okay, I won, and withdraw the troops.
Isn't the obvious way that plays is not that way. It's the way to do it is you reach an impasse, and then you have a third party like Macron or somebody come in and force the United States reluctantly to give this concession to Putin. And the more dramatic you make it, the way you make it like a reluctant deal, the more face Putin saves for the same results. So if we just concede by ourselves, that's not nearly as dramatic. It has to be really forced down our throats.
But the concession is ultimately articulated by the U.S. in this scenario, by Biden.
Yeah, you also better we sign a deal saying we're not going to make Ukraine part of NATO.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it may not even quite take something on paper. I don't know. Because I do think I'd be happy to see that, but I do think it's that Putin, we've made it seem reasonably unattractive, invading, and but you never know. But I think there's just no excuse for not doing more than we've done.
I agree, but then the question is, what's to stop Putin from coming back in 2 years and saying, okay, now let's tackle the economic integration of Ukraine and Europe. I don't like that. What's the concession you're going to give me there?
Well, first of all, that's strictly speaking between him and Europe. The United States isn't part of the European Union. Secondly, what I would advise is what they should have done in the first place in 2014 is say, why don't we try to work out a deal where some degree of integration of Ukraine into the European economy, certainly short of full-fledged EU membership, which wasn't on the table even then. It was associate membership. But work out a deal where that can be compatible with sustaining more of the economic relationship between Russia and Ukraine. My understanding is that at the time, Russia was going to have to give up, Ukraine in order to get associate membership. I think was going to have to raise some tariffs with respect to Russia or something. Anyway, I don't know. Look, it's one crisis at a time. Right now, Russia's focused on NATO.
Well, the people who worry about Munich appeasement worry that it will just encourage.
Okay, but remember, Munich itself was like a few days after Hitler invaded and took this chunk of Czechoslovakia. That's when Munich happened. It wasn't to forestall an invasion. Now, you could say, well, this is after Crimea. Well, okay, but that was 8 years ago and blah, blah, blah. I mean, the Munich analogy just is not very strict. First of all, it's not like we're giving somebody immediate positive reinforcement for invading, which Munich was. Plus, Putin, not a great guy, but also not Hitler.
That seems more. That second argument seems better. The first one, well, you're rewarding him for being about to invade. So I don't see the big difference. The argument
I think there's a very big difference, but
does appeasing show weakness or does it actually appease? I mean, that's always the question. And the answer is sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. So, I mean, the question is
sometimes,
how to tell the difference.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I just, we have so mismanaged this relationship for decades that, we just may have to eat a little crow.
How much of it is because the Ukrainian lobby is very strong?
It's funny you should mention that because Bernie Sanders had a kind of debate with Dick Durbin on the Senate floor the other day. Sanders was, God bless him, was doing the whole, look at this from Russia's point of view. This is as if Mexico signed up with China and accepted Chinese troops and weapons or Russian troops and weapons. Dick Durbin took him on. And of course, first of all, articulated the standard misconception, which is, so you're excusing Putin's behavior. Sanders had to straighten him out. But then at the end, Durbin says, my constituents in Illinois of Ukrainian descent, of Polish descent, of Baltic descent. So he's got them on his mind. And I mean, if you ask why was NATO expanded in the first place, the arms control, the arms makers were lobbying for it. They had an official group committee to expand NATO. But aside from that, the only factor I've ever heard about is, and again, I heard about them in Illinois. Durbin is from Illinois, right? And you heard about these Polish Americans in the Chicago area or something. And so I think, I mean, right now, I think something different. I don't know that an ethnic lobby is at the forefront of Biden's thoughts now. I think half of it is just the blob and fear of elite blowback. But
why would they have been in fear of? Why would they want to preserve Durbin's seat back in whenever they did it?
Well, 1997. I didn't even know what the deal was. I mean, first of all. Although
I thought the big expansion was under George W. Bush. Why would he care?
No. The beginning of NATO expansion, when membership was extended to Poland and Who else? It was 3 countries. It was probably Poland, Hungary, and
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, but was it Czechoslovakia then? Anyway, that was in 97. And what I've wondered is, did Clinton make that promise in effect before he ran for re-election in 96? Was he worried? You wouldn't think he's worried about Illinois, right? I mean, that should be a safe state for Clinton.
Correct.
So I don't know. I don't know. But you did hear about, and look, I mean, it was the Midwest broadly. It wasn't just Illinois where you had some Eastern European, some voters of Eastern European extraction.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But give the Biden team some credit. They're doing better than we feared, right? No?
Well, again, they've done, given that they, I think, wisely ruled out the military intervention of NATO in Ukraine. I think they've done a good job of raising the costs for Putin in terms of sanctions and so on. There is the possible downside of funneling weapons into Ukraine, of it getting more Ukrainians killed in the event that there is an invasion. But the standard thinking is, yeah, he's done a good job of making invasion less appealing to Putin, but you got to now give Putin a way out of the box you built, right? If you don't want the invasion.
We're in agreement.
Now, Mickey, back to these truckers. Is this going to be the start of some huge global thing? It has a little bit of that flavor, right? And a little of that is happening, I guess.
Yes, but the Europeans have said they're going to be very tough about it. They don't have our civil liberties to worry about, and it hasn't happened big time in the United States yet either. So I think that remains to be seen. I mean, the Canadians may be especially weak in terms of putting these people down. I've been meaning to go back and reread the lyrics to Convoy. Remember the song Convoy?
Yep. During the CB radio craze.
We got ourselves a convoy. There was some cause they were fighting for, but was it just incipient Trumpism or what was it?
You mean the Canadians or the guys during the convoy?
In the song.
In the song?
It was something political about the song. They weren't just.
Was there really?
They weren't just starting a convoy for the hell of it.
I mean, my friends actually had CB radios in their cars. Some of them. It was a whole thing, and you would ask oncoming truckers, were there any speed traps?
Speed traps.
Yeah.
And for good, buddy.
Yeah.
I got a.
You got a north. What was there? You got a northbound looking. That was it.
What was their word for sedans? They had some pejorative word for sedans.
Well, they'll be happy to hear there are no sedans anymore.
Why are there no CB radios? They seem just as useful.
Well, actually, now they finally are obsolete because did you know that Google Maps? This is more of a Parrot Roomy thing. It's so off topic, but Google Maps tells you about speed traps without your asking, which I think is very ethically dubious. Do you remember when we were at the New Republic? Mike Kinsley, as I recall, would not accept ads. He probably had to talk Marty out of it.
For radar detectors?
Yes, for radar detectors, because he said, we do not encourage people to break the law. And Google, this giant thing that pervades our lives, is like injecting into our neurons without our knowing it, barely, the incentive to break the law, encouragement to break the law. They should be in jail. They should be in jail, Mickey. They should be in jail.
Well, you can get them on that.
Anyway,
speaking of laws that shouldn't exist, I didn't think Hillary's email thing was a big deal. I thought
the server. You mean?
Yeah, you have to. If you're running the government, you have to have some way to have a private communication that doesn't automatically go to the National Archives, so historians of the future can go over it. And same with Trump. He ripped up the piece of paper. I'm sure it was a violation of the Historical Records Act. The Historical Records Act is insane. Do we run the government only for purposes of historians? No. We want to make policy, and to make good policy, you have to be able to have confidential, deliberations, even ones that will only come out 20 years from now. There's some people will be alive in 20 years, and then they want it to come out.
There are a lot of dubious laws, but you can't go around letting everyone decide which laws they want to obey.
But I'm not going to get real excited about
I am.
In evasions of the Historical Records Act, in Hillary's case or in Trump's case. They can pass a law in Kenya where you're taxed 85% of your income. It's a law, but it's a stupid law, and people are given more moral leeway to disobey it. I just made that up. I don't know actually what the tax rate is in Kenya, but
it was almost that high here for a while, wasn't it?
With a marginal tax rate, yeah.
Back in the good old days, but one thing I would ask you is, like, Trump apparently actually took boxes of documents to Mar-a-Lago, right? Physical documents.
But he's got to take them somewhere.
He doesn't.
He's allowed to take boxes of documents. This idea that he can't keep any document, that's insane. He has to keep copies, maybe, okay.
Well, no, but these are, I think, right. These are, I think, the sole copies of these. And my question is, like, what are the chances that he hasn't gone through and gotten rid of the ones that are closest to being incriminating with respect to the Stop the Steal movement?
I think it is bizarre. There are these gaps in his phone logs. I just find it hard to believe that Trump is that smart that he was aware, as he was plotting on January 6th and before, he was aware enough to destroy all the evidence. Do you really think he was that savvy? Maybe he was.
No, and also, I mean, the tearing up the documents is apparently a long-standing habit of his.
Yeah. And the good news for Trump is, if this is the big scoop from Maggie Haberman's book, it ain't much. If that's all she's got, he's dodged the bullet from.
Is this
Maggie
where that
Haberman.
Came from? The document came from her book?
This is from Maggie Haberman's big book called Confidence Man, which I'm sure is very good, but if that's the only scoop, he's,
Also, like, what are the ethics on how long, if at all, a reporter for the New York Times can not report something in the paper so that she can report it later in her book?
Well, apparently she's in the clear because she didn't have much for the book, right? So it's Bob Woodward has a lot, and the Newsweek team had a lot of more trouble that, withholding things from the paper. And Woodward makes the judgment. Every now and then he publishes something, even though it could be in his book. The Newsweek thing eventually sort of, where they had like some reporters reporting the real story, and then that was held in confidence until after the election. But if they got a real scoop, weren't they honor bound to actually report it before the election when it might make a difference? And they didn't do it, and they produced a great book, but it was a huge sort of ethical dilemma. And I think it sort of collapsed of its own weight, or collapsed as a result of that dilemma. But Haberman doesn't seem to, and maybe this was new stuff she discovered, while researching the book. It was in the form of an interview that could have easily have taken place while she was researching the book, when it wasn't news.
Could be.
So I tend to think she's pretty ethical. She's biased, but I think she's not withholding anything that might hurt Trump.
You don't think she's destroyed documents?
So
on the state mandate, this is not unrelated to the Canadian truckers. I mean, just as the Canadian truckers, just as this movement threatens to spread, you've got these several blue states, including yours, right, ending their mask mandates. Two most populous blue states, New York and California.
But I don't think Los Angeles County has.
Oh.
That's the most populous area of my populous blue state. So it's a mixed bag, but yes, that's going to take the wind out of their sails when it's no longer mandated. And I must admit, I'm trying to be left wing here, but I have the Republicans are running around saying, well, nothing's changed. All that's changed is the polling. This is obviously political, that all these Democrats at once decided to get rid of the mandates. But no, something did change. Omicron went away. It's going away even as we speak. And so that would be a difference between now and early January, when we weren't sure it was going away. So, and so they did it all at once. They realized Omicron's going away. We can raise the mandates. That doesn't mean that they were complete hypocrites, or even that they weren't following the science. It could just be, things that changed. That's certainly what sealed the deal for me in terms of not wanting the mandates to go away. Is, well, look, there's no more. The virus isn't out there anymore. So
Well, I mean, it's kind of out there. But it will be interesting to see if now we just, adapt to an environment with some amount of COVID floating around, and put our faith in a combination of the way, the vaccine, dulls the impact of the virus, and the new therapies, notably the Pfizer one.
Well,
in principle, the combination of those things should make this kind of like the flu.
It'll depend how low the virus goes. Right now, it looks like it's auguring for the center of the earth and is going down to zero. I doubt it'll do that, but it's a pretty precipitous fall. And if you look at South Africa as the precursor, it basically went away in South Africa, and now a new one has come back. Now I think the stealth Omicron has come back, or there's some other variant that's come back.
Well, there's another. There's a related alarming thing, which I think there's evidence that having had Omicron gives you less protection against getting it again than having had earlier variants gave you against getting them again. And we'll see.
The other issue is all the ire has shifted from the unvaxxed, who, if you remember from last week, I said it was only 15% of adults. It's actually only 13% of adults are unvaxxed, completely unvaxxed, to the booster take-up, which is the main failure of public policy now. Is the booster take-up rate is like 54% or something. It's like hovering around 50%. And why aren't people getting boosted? Even if people who've already had 2 shots, so they're not truckers. Actually, the truckers are pretty well vaccinated, it turns out, but they're just against the mandates. But what would stop somebody who's had 2 vaxes from getting the booster? And David Lenhart wrote a column about this, and he said, well, maybe the problem is the fragmented nature of our healthcare system. They don't really know where to go to get the booster. Nobody calls them on the phone and says you have to get the booster. That's sort of true, although even Medicare wouldn't stop that, because Medicare is fractured too. So if we had Medicare for all, we still have that problem. And then he said, well, people, the public spokesmen have been too nuanced. They've been too complicated. They haven't delivered the clear message. You got to get the booster. I don't care what. They said, well, you got to get the booster if you're in a risk group, or if you're that or that or that. They never said everybody get the boosters from the start. I think a much more plausible reason is all the 2 vaccines had side effects. The media has covered them up. They weren't that important, but I had side effects. Most people, about half the people I know, have had some kind of side effect. And they said they didn't want to take the booster because they didn't want more side effects. That seems obvious. And since I wrote that, I've gotten all this feedback, supporting feedback saying, that's exactly why I didn't take it, because I figured I was good enough and I didn't want any more grief.
By the way, go ahead. Go ahead and finish. Go ahead. I was going to say your hypothesis. I think this was a Parrot Room hypothesis that Bob, was it Saget or Saget, that he and maybe some others had died because boosters are bad for you. That hypothesis took a turn for the worse this week when they found that he died of blunt head trauma.
Yes.
So are you abandoning that hypothesis?
Not abandoning that, probably abandoning it for Bob Saget.
Yeah, but meanwhile, I assume you're coming up with whole new conspiracy theories about Bob Saget.
I could, but I don't think I want to.
Sure, no, blunt head trauma, man, on the back. How easy is that? Not easy.
I don't quite.
Back of the head
by somebody who'd seen that movie.
Who didn't think those home videos were so damn funny? I don't know. But
it's weird. I once hit my head and Mike Kinsley insisted on waking me up in the middle of the night, and I guess he had a point. To see if I. But what do you do if the person's unresponsive? You somehow rush them to the hospital and they somehow can save them from the brain bleed. I guess
think there are people who are going to want a little elaboration on the context of this whole thing with Mike, but maybe not.
He was house sitting, and I was freeloading in one of the spare rooms of his house sit.
Okay.
And I was riding around in the Jeep, and the guy abruptly stopped, and my head hit the roll bar.
But that was the front.
Really hard.
That was the front.
It was the front is stronger, yeah.
Well, no, but also it's just easier to inadvertently hit the front of your head than it is to hit the back of your head, which is what happened.
The front is your skull is much stronger up here. So, anyway, I didn't die, and yes. So the troll. Are you ready to? Are you sticking with your opposition to gerrymandering, even though it's turned out that gerrymandering is helping the Democrats and may save them?
Was I a big anti-gerrymanderer?
Oh God! Oh, let's go to the videotape.
Well, I recently had some blunt head trauma. I may have forgotten a lot of stuff. What did I use to
This
say?
is a gimme. All you have to do is say, yes, I'm against gerrymandering. And you're like,
oh, yes,
you don't want to do that.
I'm religious. It's like almost a jihad level of opposition. Yes.
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
Okay. Well, we've taken your number. You wonder if this gerrymandering thing, which was supposed to in itself hand Congress to Republicans, is turning out to be a plus for Democrats. What are the other things that are going to turn around and also be a plus for Democrats? You know?
Well, what I had always wondered, before we get to that, I mean, first of all, I don't think it's clear that it's a plus for Democrats. So they are finding that in some states, the Democrats are gerrymandering to their benefit. I never denied that was one thing I was someone who said, the Republicans are these evil people who will gerrymander. I mean, I realized that it was just because they controlled more state legislatures that they were winning the gerrymandering game. Whatever else I said about it, but yeah.
Weren't you in principle against gerrymandering? I'm against it in principle.
Yeah, I'd like to see a truce. I'd like to see neither side do it, but I'm probably more out. Yeah,
a society where voters feel their vote doesn't count because 90% of the elections are foreordained is a society of alienation and apathy.
Right.
We don't want that.
No, it's bad. Now, in a short-term sense, it shouldn't affect the composition of the national legislature, assuming that the state legislature, reflects the landscape of actual opinion. One thing I didn't understand was why were Republicans so good at controlling state legislatures? More good than you would expect on the basis of like national presidential popular votes and stuff. Why was that?
I don't quite understand that either. That's a good point. But of course, gerrymandering can gerrymandering can skew the balance of power in Congress, right? You understand that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what I mean is, if you assume that, like, let's say there's anyway, it can happen. It can happen. I wouldn't predict that one party or the other would be more inclined to be able to use it to their advantage, I guess. It's the question of why Republicans are better at winning state legislature elections.
Well, you would think the Democrats would have the advantage because it's easier to do in big states where you have a lot of pieces to move around, and 2 of the 3 big states are Democratic. So
that's an interesting possibility. You would think. I mean, I would think it's a risky game to begin with. But I haven't.
It's a risky game because there's sort of 2 strategies. There's the protect incumbent strategy, or there's where you give yourself a 60-40 advantage in all the districts you care about. Or there's the go for broke advantage, where you give yourself a 52-48 and you hope to win a whole lot of seats by 1 point. Right. And that can really backfire on you because you could lose a whole lot of seats by 1 point. Right.
The more districts you try to win, the more precarious your advantage is in the average district.
Right. Anyway, okay. Well, we'll let the viewers decide whether you are a flaming hypocrite or not.
Now, my question is, this Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, do you think this was intentional, this gazpacho police thing?
You think it was stray voltage?
Well, I just, the first thing I thought is, this is obviously good for her to have all these snobby elites making fun of her. I mean, it's a perfect thing, right? Because gazpacho is not a food of the people, right? Because I had never heard of gazpacho until I came to the East Coast. It was about the time I heard about brie, It's like, it's this kind of snobby food.
Gazpacho has come to West Texas.
Well, everything has come everywhere by now, I guess, and the lag is probably
I remember
less
I was
and
once
less.
driving through West Texas, which is, after 3 hours out of El Paso, it's like the most godforsaken place in the world.
Hey, those are my people, buddy. Look, can I just say, 3 hours out of El Paso, headed east, is like literally where my parents grew up. So careful,
Okay.
careful.
But there's some little town there like San Anselmo or Saint somebody, Sierra Nevada or some town like that. And
I mean, you're roughly in the Midland, Odessa area at that point.
No, you're not quite there yet. And I was saying I'd really like, one of those little Starbucks coffees, pre-made coffees in a little container. This is when they were starting to be introduced. And I stopped at the only gas station in Sierra Blanca, I think is the name of the town. And they had them. I realized we really have a national culture.
Wait, they had what?
They had those pretentious little Starbucks coffees, cappuccino in a glass.
Well, yeah, Starbucks is a nationwide chain. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. They're bringing the nationwide culture, and they'll somebody has nationwide gazpacho too. Anyway, I don't think my esteem for Marjorie Taylor Greene, which cannot go any higher, would be enhanced if she did it intentionally. I don't think so.
I mean, it could be a mistake. It's an obvious. Who among us has not walked into a restaurant and ordered a bowl of Gestapo? It's an obvious. It happens to.
It's a malapropism.
But yeah, but I just it's so perfect for her, for everybody to be down on her. It's like, it reminds me of the Sarah Palin trial. It's like, you want to tell me she wasn't delighted when the New York Times accused her of whatever they accused her of?
I haven't followed the trial. I did read John Harris's defense of James Bennett, which I agreed with, except it's clear what was going on. It's not that he was just trying to make the piece livelier by sticking in this swat against Palin. It's how can we turn this seemingly neutral piece into an anti-Palin jibe that will please our readers because our readers are reflexively anti-Republican, even though a Democrat did this latest shooting. I mean, obviously that was going on. And that was disreputable. I'm sorry. I love James Bennett. That's disreputable.
First of all, because we know James Bennett, we may be more in touch with this than the average.
We read the New York Times. The editorial page is going to twist everything.
No, I'm just saying people may need a little background here. Sarah Palin is suing the New York Times for libel, I guess, right? Because of an editorial seeming to attribute the shooting of Congressperson Gabby Giffords to a map that Sarah Palin's Political Action Committee had circulated that showed these congressional districts with bullseyes on them or something, and one of them was Gabby Giffords. So the Times editorial seemed to say, by one reading, that there was a causal connection between these two things, and that's what she is now suing them over.
Yeah. I must admit, the guy who did the shooting was a kook. Okay, he didn't read any of it.
Seems to have been apolitical. Even I don't
see. I always thought Republicans got away with a lot in the Gabby Giffords aftermath. Because if you had asked me which congressional race in the country before all this happened was most cathected, which Democrat did I most want to lose, because it was just my emotions were tied up in it. It was the Gabby Giffords race.
And why is that?
Because it was all tied up with immigration. She was like, it was the litmus test of how far the anti less immigration, tougher borders crowd would go, and she was trying to get away with it by being sort of half liberal, half conservative.
So she would have been a Trumpist target had this shooter been a Trumpist, which he wasn't. I mean,
yes. And had it been 8 years later, a Trumpist target for election, for unseating, yes. Not for
of course, Sarah Palin, in retrospect, was a harbinger of Trumpism.
A little bit, yeah. She fell into that. She was
brought to us by Bill Kristol, who is now an ardent anti-Trump.
She was a very good governor, apparently. That's the irony of it all.
Was she?
I think Josh Green wrote an article, who was the best governor in America. He said, God damn it, it's Sarah Palin. Or you could ask him, but I'm pretty sure she was. Bill Kristol had a reason for doing what he did. And her acceptance speech at the Republican convention was the high point of the McCain campaign, much as they would hate
Democrats were briefly terrified. For days, Democrats were terrified But then they finally neutralized her.
I think the speech was written by Matt Scully, but it was delivered really well. So
it's hard to say exactly how long we've been going, Mickey, but it's coming up on an hour, I think. The reason it's hard is because we got disconnected and had to. People may have spotted the seam in the middle. That
was my fault. My computer got unplugged and ran out of power.
So you had actually plugged it in, and it just got unplugged?
Yeah, but I had stretched the cord so much that it yanked it out of it.
So you assume full responsibility.
It's not very. I like James Bennett. I assume full responsibility. I had a couple more things that were sort of A-worthy, but
go ahead.
Andrew Yang wrote this good column, nothing new, about how there's a male crisis in America. So a third of the labor force, of a certain age, under some impressive age, is unemployed, not in the labor force. More people are living with their mothers at home than are living with their wives or romantic partners. Men have sort of dropped out of society. They're shooting up and killing themselves, or they're getting into trouble. But how does that jibe with his support of the UBI? The UBI will just make it worse. It'll just buy the fentanyl and tell people they don't have to join the labor force at all. They can live on the UBI. It's insane if you believe that there's a crisis.
Well, maybe it's at
men
least
being dropped out and not feeling they have a purpose, to also be for the UBI giving them free money to stick around and drop out and not have a purpose.
Yeah, but at least you wouldn't have to live with your mother, right? You could move out of your mother's house.
Yeah, the UBI is, you can live better if you're with your mother.
It's not that generous.
You got the mother cooks for you.
Yeah. I'm not a UBI fan or an Andrew Yang fan. I haven't forgiven him for not knowing the difference between well, anyway. What was your second thing?
Oh, the second thing was there was this ridiculous article saying Republicans are betting on black conservatives to win the midterm elections, because they're all the Latino vote and a little bit of the black vote went more Republican than expected. And that's just completely insane. They have 5 issues that are dead, slam dunk winners among the vote of everybody except blacks and Latinos. They have inflation, they have crime, they have, critical race theory, they have the border.
Wait, some of those are of concern to black and Latino voters.
Well, they're concerned to all American citizens, yes. But they have across the board winners. They do not rely on identity politics, do not rely on black conservatives, and yet somehow there's this whole segment of the Republican Party that's bought into this idea is the only way that we can win is by wooing away minorities through ethnic politics. So there's apparently a big movement among donors for Senator Scott, who may be a wonderful man, but doesn't seem to me like presidential timber. He's as much presidential timber as other people who run, but I wouldn't say there goes a president. And yet they love Scott because they think he's going to get the black vote for us.
This is Tim Scott?
Yeah.
I would say he's got his shit together at least as much as the last 2 presidents, but, that's not setting the bar very high. I agree.
So anyway, but John Phillips, the radio host, pointed out to me, it is important if Latinos become more conservative on issues like the border, because even if they're going to remain Democrats, but the problem is in Democratic primaries, somebody who's sane on the border hasn't had a prayer. I mean, you're looking at him, right? I ran for Senate on a tight border platform, and yet, Bob, I got no traction within the Democratic Party.
Really? I was thinking that was like a real nail biter, that election. You were, I guess I'm getting you mixed up with somebody else.
As long as I beat Nick Kristof, I'll be happy, Bob.
Hey, how is his candidacy doing?
I actually don't know. But the point is, if Latinos turn on immigration, there's a hope for a sensible Democrat to win a primary, which would change the whole complexion of the issue for the better. So love the idea that Latinos are getting more conservative on immigration or not buying the ultra-liberal line, but don't think it's going to help the Republicans, might help formulate better policy.
Hey, did you hear there's an item about this in today's issue of the Non-Zero newsletter? Once I put it out, that is. That, what's going to do the trick on the border? They're going to have robot dogs. Did you see that?
I saw a picture of a robot dog. I don't think that's
put robot dogs on the borders. You don't think that'll do it? I think a bunch of them. I think
the cartels are very, very clever and skilled, and they will take care of the robot dogs. Yeah.
You think?
Yeah.
Plus, they're ruthless. They would kill a robot dog without thinking twice, right?
They'll hang the robot dogs upside down by their heels from bridges.
Yeah.
I just think you have to reduce the incentive for the people to come here, and that means you have to have some threat. If they get in the country, they still might be deported, and Biden has eliminated that threat.
I don't know.
You have to have an e-verify system, so they're not going to get a regular mainstream job. They're going to be confined to the underground economy, and that's not as appealing.
Well, you could put tasers on the robot dogs, right? I'm not recommending it, but I mean,
all these high-tech solutions are the solution of the anti-borders crowd because they think that it will appease the pro-borders crowd because the drones. Well, if you have drones, that'll do it. No, drones. All these high-tech things are no substitute for a wall.
You need a wall
and eliminating the incentives to come here.
Somebody should run for president on the platform that, if elected, they will build a wall. Have you thought about that?
It is weird how all of a sudden, after all of a sudden, the Republicans are realizing, he didn't get the wall built at all, did he? After he lost the election, they would go, well, or while he was running, said, well, he built a little bit of the wall. He built 47 miles of new wall. He refurbished this old wall, which he should get some credit for. But no, it was a total flop. And a pathetic total flop. And almost everybody now concedes it. No, you don't see people running around saying, well, he built half a wall.
But at least he got rid of Obamacare and gave us something much better, as he promised. Oh, wait, he didn't do that either.
But I give him points for not getting rid of Obamacare.
But at least he brought our troops home from all the wars. Oh, wait, he didn't do that either. He actually got us more deeply involved, didn't he?
No, he set us up for withdrawing from Afghanistan.
In a way he did. In a way he did, but that in retrospect was a dirty trick. That didn't work out for Biden politically, although I'm in favor of it as a matter of policy. So we should probably go. I think even with the, what are we going to talk about in the Parrot Room at patreon.com/Parrot Room?
Well, you didn't want us to overpromise on the Parrot Room.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have listed so many things that we were not possibly going to get to them.
Can we list possible topics?
We can list, yeah.
No guarantees.
No guarantees. But people want guarantees? There's so few things that are certain in this crazy world, Mickey. Maybe we can provide the certainty that people want.
And the Parrot Room is not one of them.
Okay. So what is possible? I'm writing possible. Possible from Mickey. What is it?
The main thing is there was a very good article which you had me read by some guy I'd never heard of
which I failed to read after
you failed to read. Oh, okay. Well, then I can talk
you'll
about
explain it to me. It'll be great. It'll be very spontaneous.
Why that we should not expect wokeness to go away anytime soon.
Right. I read part of it.
Now,
it seemed like bullshit.
Right now, people are crowing. The tide has turned. Youngkin is in Virginia. Wokeness is on the run. And this guy said, not so fast. Wokeness is pretty much here to stay for our lifetimes.
Okay.
And it's a very good article. I think there may be holes in it. I don't know quite what they are, but I have some suggestions. You said you had some doubts on my constant use of the word corporatism.
I just want elaboration, and maybe we could also get into your war on meritocracy, which is related, probably.
Sure, and the other issue is my idea, my half-baked idea that colleges could have affirmative action for different cultures as opposed to different races. I decided halfway through last week this was a terrible idea. And then I decided, well, maybe it's not so terrible. So
like what? Like skateboard? Like you got bad test scores, but you're a good skateboarder, that kind of thing?
Or I mean, you're the emissary of skateboard culture to Harvard, Bob.
That's more of an athletic thing, and we already give exceptions to athletes.
So skateboard has a whole culture. They have fashion, they have hairstyles.
Did you hear about this birds aren't real subculture? I mean, they don't really believe it, but it's a joke. It's great. It's you heard about those people?
No, I haven't. There are a lot of things I haven't heard of.
Makes sense when you think about it. Birds don't look real.
We
may talk about that. Because I think they represent the hope of the next generation. The birds aren't real people. I'm really not kidding. I'm really serious. I think at this point, absurdism would be better than what we have.
Okay. Well, you should really read this whole article. It's right up your alley.
I read part of it.
There's a Mr. Schellenberger, is that the guy's name? Report about homelessness and how they're all really drug addicts, and it's not that they can't afford housing. And there are a couple of other key facts he has that I can talk about.
Didn't we know that was a big part of the problem? We didn't know that.
We knew it was a big part of the problem, but there's still the emphasis on, gee, if only we had lower rents. No, they're coming to San Francisco from all over the country because they know they can live there.
Some. I mean, it's not a monolithic problem. That would help. That would help somewhat.
Somewhat.
So I think we've covered that. What else?
No, we haven't.
Yes, we have. It would help somewhat.
In San Francisco, they give them $820 of benefits a month. So if you have $820 of benefits a month, you could live on the streets for free and not move into a shelter where they have a drug test. Hey, that's a good deal for people from outside the state. And the vast majority of people on the streets of San Francisco are not native San Franciscans who failed to get an apartment because it was too expensive. There are people from the rest of the country who came there because they knew they could get this deal of $820 a month and live on the streets.
Okay, now we've covered it. Thank you. What else?
Yes.
What else?
Now we've covered it. Yes.
I'll go. Yeah.
Vladimir Putin's the repulsive joke he told Zelensky or that told the Ukrainians.
I didn't hear this. Are you going to tell it to us?
Yeah, I mean, roughly. I'm not Bob Saget, but
I'm looking forward to
I'll do my best.
Repulsive joke. Oh yeah, let's talk more about Bob Saget.
Really, I don't have anything to say about Bob.
Okay, well, if you don't have a conspiracy theory, I don't. God knows.
Yet, although I have the break to figure out a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, maybe one will occur to you. So, here's some things I want to talk about. A couple of weeks ago, Steve Pinker had tweeted, it's the 50th anniversary of one of the most important papers in the history of biology and psychology, Robert Trivers' Parental Investment in Sexual Selection.
Right.
Which gave a deep explanation of when and why sex differences should evolve. I had said I might talk about it in the Parrot Room. I said it the next week. This time I'm going to do it. And also, I'm going to talk about the joke that Robert Trivers himself told me, which is a parental investment in sexual selection related joke. It's a guy walks into a singles bar joke that is not unrelated to his theory of parental investment in sexual selection. I'm going to tell you. Yeah.
Is it a joke Bob Saget might have told, or is it too clean?
It's too clean. It's too clean for him. I mean, what isn't? What isn't? I ask you.
Good.
I mean, it would get a little blowback in some circles, but it's not Bob Saget dirty. No. I want to talk a little more about Joe Rogan and Spotify. We didn't even mention the fact that this week was N-word apology week for Rogan. I think next week is scheduled to be fat shaming apology week, but so far no signs of that. But that's the big apology I think he has yet to go. Anyway, I want to talk a little more about Rogan and Spotify. I want to talk about a little more about this Pacific War in the Pacific trilogy I'm reading, my latest takeaways from that. Yeah.
Did you know that Jordan Peterson is on some weird diet where he eats mainly meat?
Well, that's a long-standing thing. He and his daughter have been shilling for beef forever. Okay. But now, speaking of which, they did find clonazepam in Bob Saget's bloodstream. I think, wasn't that Jordan Peterson's problem, the thing that ultimately led to an induced coma?
I don't know.
it was either that or some other something else in that family. Either that or Xanax.
Whatever he's eating is working for him. So,
is it? Some people think he's gotten less coherent. Jordan Peterson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some news on the lab leak theory, Bob.
Okay. Good.
And there's a little bit of news on decoupling from China. So.
Lab leak news. Decoupling news. And then I want to talk about my Tom Friedman conversation. It turns out that I'm the Friedman whisperer. I'll elaborate on that. Friedman whisperer.
Don't let the power go to your head.
Well, you saw though, like it made me think I should just have a conversation with all the influential people, and they'll all go, Bob, on reflection, you were right. And then the world will be saved. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that'd work. But don't, there could be the number one case of power going to somebody's head is incoming Mayor Adams of New York, who's declared that New York must be vegan.
But then it turns out he's not even vegan, and that was all a cruel hoax, right?
Well, but it's not. It's a cruel hoax to the people who are still going to get these crappy lunches, and yet, he's not saying they can cheat. So
he's not even a vegetarian.
It reminded me of the scene in Bananas when Esposito, the gorilla, finally seizes power, and he says, "From now on, everyone who was not 16 years old is now 16 years old. And you must change your underwear every hour and wear it on the outside so we can check." And somebody whispers to Woody Allen, "The power has driven him mad." Anyway.
That reminds me of an actual command issued in a banana republic once that was even crazier and not unrelated to Bob Trivers. And I will talk about that in the Parrot Room. The other thing I'll talk about, yeah.
The official language of the Parrot Room is Swedish.
Sorry, which brings us back to Spotify. This Ek guy, he's Swedish, right? The guy who runs Spotify.
I interrupted you. You were about to say something.
I learned a harsh lesson in about Substack this last week, which I will share with people. When I watched I lost 10 paid subscribers in about 36 hours, and I finally figured out why. And I'll share that bittersweet lesson.
That sounds very bitter.
Bittersweet.
Although you have now hundreds and hundreds of subscribers, so
I have my paid subscribers. Paid subscribers are in 4 figures, Mickey, 4 quattro. And so is our Patreon following, and we encourage right? We encourage people to join us at patreon.com/Parrot Room.
Yes.
But if they don't do that, you know what the next best thing would be, Mickey?
Send us money.
No, that's what that is. The next best thing would be smash that like button, rate and review us. Tell your friends that birds aren't real.
Okay. Birds are real.
That's the kind of spontaneous humor we have in the Parrot Room, and we probably quit while we're ahead. I will see you there. I will see you there, Mickey.
Okay.